The first time I heard the creaking above my bedroom ceiling, I tried to ignore it. Old houses make noises, I told myself. Just the building settling, adjusting to the weather. But when the dragging sound continued, night after night, slow and deliberate, like someone rearranging furniture in the small hours of the morning, I began to question my decision to rent this place. I found the listing for this two-bedroom house in the Millfield suburbs 2 months prior. The rent was suspiciously low for the market. The commute downtown would be longer, but I could start saving for a down payment on my own place. Mr. Hargrove, the landlord, had seemed overly eager to rent it out. Too eager, I realized now. During the walkthrough, I noticed a small hatch in the hallway ceiling. Mr. Hargrove waved it off when I asked. "Oh, just the attic crawl space, cramped up there, not part of the lease agreement. Just holds some old insulation, nothing worth seeing." He insisted there was no pull-down ladder. The only access was supposedly from the roof outside, a deliberate choice to prevent tenants from storing things and potentially damaging the ceiling. The scratching and dragging sounds started during my 3rd week there. I often worked late, getting home after midnight. First, I blamed the neighbor's cat walking on the roof. But cats aren't heavy enough to make the ceiling creak like that, and they certainly don't drag heavy objects back and forth in an attic. I called Mr. Hargrove a few times. When he finally answered, his voice was strained. Probably raccoons or squirrels. They find ways in through the eaves. I'll send someone to check it out. But weeks passed, and no one ever came. The sounds developed a pattern. They began shortly after I got home. Often gentle footsteps pacing the length of the attic, followed by the distinct dragging. Sometimes it sounded like furniture being rearranged. Other times, like a single heavy weight being pulled across the floorboards. On nights I arrived home later than usual, the sounds seemed to be waiting, as if whoever, or whatever, was up there had grown impatient. What unnerved me most was the growing realization that my presence seemed to trigger the activity. If I left the room, turned on the TV, the noises would cease until I returned. As if it knew when I was alone, vulnerable. Sleep became elusive. I lay awake, straining to follow the movements overhead. Dark circles formed under my eyes. Colleagues commented on my unkempt appearance. After 6 weeks of this psychological torture, I decided I had to investigate myself. I took a day off work, waiting until a bright afternoon, hoping daylight would dispel some of the attic's gloom. I bought a powerful flashlight, a hammer, and a small pry bar. The hallway hatch was sealed shut with paint around the edges, suggesting it hadn't been opened in years. It took considerable effort to break the seal. Dust and paint chips rained down on my face. My heart hammered, sweat pouring down, and not just from the exertion. When the hatch finally popped open, a wave of musty, stagnant air washed down. The smell was odd, not just dust and age, but something vaguely organic, hard to define. I shone the flashlight into the darkness. Rough wooden rafters, old, packed-down insulation. No ladder. I dragged the dining table underneath, stacked a chair on top. The makeshift arrangement looked precarious, but it held long enough for me to climb up and hoist myself through the opening. The attic was larger than Mr. Hargrove had implied, though the sloped roof prevented me from standing fully upright. Thick dust coated the floorboards, mostly undisturbed except for one clear path worn through the middle. My flashlight beam revealed footprints, not rodent or raccoon prints. They looked human, but not quite right. elongated, strangely spaced, as if whoever made them had an unnatural gait. The path led from the hatch towards the far corner of the attic, where the slope of the roof met the floor. As I followed the tracks, my breathing grew shallow and rapid. The air was thicker here. The flashlight beam trembled as I neared the corner where the footprints seemed to vanish into the wall. On closer inspection, I noticed a small gap between the wall framing and the roofline, a narrow, dark space that continued somewhere out of sight. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. A chill ran down my spine despite the suffocating heat. Something in that dark recess was watching me. I felt it, a certainty beyond reason, an oppressive weight on my consciousness. The silence became absolute. Even the normal creaks of the house ceased, as if the structure itself was holding its breath. Then, a soft, slow exhale whispered from the darkness beyond the gap. Not animal, not wind, deliberate. I scrambled back too quickly, nearly tumbling through the hatch opening. My elbow slammed against a rafter, sending a jolt of pain up my arm, but I barely registered it. Adrenaline surged. I clambered down the makeshift ladder, nearly sending the chair and table crashing, slammed the hatch closed, and dragged the heaviest piece of furniture I could find, my wardrobe, underneath it. My hands shook violently as I called Mr. Hargrove, my voice cracking as I demanded answers. This time, he picked up on the first ring, as if expecting the call. He listened to my breathless story without interruption. When I finished, the line was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He explained that the previous tenants had reported similar things. He admitted he'd hoped the issue had resolved itself during the months the house sat empty. He spoke vaguely about the house's peculiarities, suggesting some spaces could develop their own awareness over time. A ridiculous notion, yet after what I'd experienced, it planted a seed of formless dread. Mr. Hargrove offered my deposit back if I wanted to break the lease. His willingness only made me more suspicious that he knew more than he was letting on. I should have taken the offer, packed my bags that afternoon, but stubborn curiosity held me there. I convinced myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe someone was breaking into the attic from outside, using it as a hideout while I was at work. That would explain why the activity increased when I was home, the intruder trying to scare me away. I set up motion sensor cameras around the house, focusing on the roofline. I carefully placed a digital audio recorder up in the attic, near the strange footprints, before sealing the hatch and replacing the wardrobe. Then I waited. 3 nights passed with nothing. The attic was silent. On the 4th night, exhausted and beginning to doubt my own memories, I returned home to an eerie quiet. The camera footage showed nothing, but the audio recorder had triggered multiple times. The first few recordings were just ambient noise. The last one started similarly, then captured the front door opening and closing as I left for work. 2 hours of silence passed. I was about to fast forward when I heard it, the familiar dragging sound, much clearer now. Then the slow footsteps, the uneven rhythm, like a limp. They approached the recorder, growing louder, then stopped right beside it. What came next turned my blood cold. Deep, ragged breathing, punctuated by wet, snuffling sounds, as if something was trying to catch my scent. After several minutes, a voice emerged, so distorted and choked I initially thought it was static. But as I listened again and again, the words became unmistakable. Home. Soon. Just then, my phone rang. making me jump and drop the recorder. It was Mr. Hargrove. Before I could speak, he asked if I'd been back in the attic, his voice laced with an urgency I hadn't heard before. I stammered out an admission, told him about the recording. His reaction was immediate and fierce. "Leave the house now. Don't pack anything. Just get in your car and drive to the address I'm texting you. I'll explain everything when you're safe." As I stood there, phone in hand, trying to process the frantic instructions, the power cut out. The house plunged into absolute darkness. And in that darkness, I heard the unmistakable sound of the attic hatch being forced open from above. The wardrobe I'd placed as a barrier scraped across the hallway floor, shoved aside by an unimaginable force from above. My body froze in terror as something heavy dropped from the ceiling with a floor-shaking thud. In the blackness, I heard those uneven footsteps approaching, the same distinct rhythm from the recording. My paralysis broke. I lunged for the front door, fumbling with the lock as the footsteps closed the distance behind me. The cold night air hit my face as I burst outside, not daring to look back, running for my car. The engine roared to life, headlights illuminating the empty porch as I reversed out of the driveway with reckless speed. I drove straight to the address Mr. Hargrove sent, a small motel off the highway. He was waiting in the parking lot, looking older and more haggard than I remembered. He handed me a room key, saying we'd talk in the morning. He pointed to something dark smeared on the back of my shirt, looking disturbingly like dirt mixed with something black and viscous. I never went back to that house. Mr. Hargrove arranged for movers, though several items, including the audio recorder, were reported missing. My police report was dismissed for lack of evidence. I later learned the house had seen 7 tenants in the past decade, none staying longer than 3 months. Local rumors spoke of the property once being part of a larger estate with a troubled history. Sometimes, in the dead of night, in my new apartment, I wake up thinking I hear uneven footsteps in the hall outside my door. I tell myself it's just a neighbor coming home late, but deep down, I know better, because whatever was in that attic didn't just want the house to itself. It wanted company, and I have the unsettling feeling that it's still looking.